Thank you so much for all of these papers. I really learned a lot, and all of these papers made me really reconsider the United States' role in the world, and especially the role within the kind of broader system of European diplomacy. It also all of these papers in different ways made me rethink Japan's role in international politics as well. And so I wonder if we couldn't think more broadly, that's what I'm going to try to do, about the global response to Japan's victory over Russia. And I'm just going to very briefly offer the Ottoman case, because there was a profound reaction to it in that empire. So this was a war that was widely reported upon in the press. There were commemorative books published about the war, and also specifically about the treaty. It was an event that trickled down to cultural production. One of my favorite novels from 1911 is a murder mystery. It was a bestseller. Sherlock Holmes has to come to the Ottoman Empire to solve the mystery. But the novel begins with Istanbul just seething with rumor that what is happening? How is this possible? The Japanese have defeated one of the great powers. What does this mean for the future of the Ottoman Empire? What does this mean for the future of global politics and Japan's role within global politics? So historian Jamil Aydin argues that Japan's victory over Russia was one of the central events in the non-Western, non-Christian world, which many contemporaries at the time talked about as an Asian awakening, and that it was a kind of proof against Western racial and cultural superiority. And we could see this across the Middle East, across Asia, India, Egypt. Just to give you one very brief example, Ahmed Riza, an Ottoman politician, this is what he had to say about the Japanese victory. Quote, "The splendid victory of the Japanese has proved the Christian world arrogant, that it is not indispensable for a people to embrace Christianity in order to acquire morality, civilization, and an appetite for progress. The more isolated and preserved from contact with European invaders and plunderers a people is, the better is the measure of its evolution towards a rational renovation." This episode of Japan winning was so important. There was a massive conference in Istanbul, also in 1911, that was an analysis of Japan. It was the Renaissance of Japan, is what it was called. And there's this big question: can we modernize the way that Japan has? And ultimately, and the Ottoman Foreign Ministry was part of this conference. Ultimately, the argument was that Japan offered a new path for establishing equality in international relations. So I guess what I'd ask all of the panelists to kind of think about, because it really, again, made me think about the interests of all the different players, of Japan, of Russia, also of the United States. In many ways, we might see all three of these powers being kind of at the edges of the Eurocentric international order represented by the Concert of Europe. So, Professor Inaba, I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about why Japan wanted the United States to broker the peace. Why not rely upon concert diplomacy? Was that an option? Was it the Russians who pushed back against that? Also, what did the United States think that it was doing by hosting this conference? And that's actually a question for all of the panelists. Professor Tilchin, I wondered if you could say a bit more about why President Roosevelt was more sympathetic to Japan than Russia. I was really struck by this idea of this kind of American obsession with an Asian balance of power in this early period, and wondered if you could say a bit more. Is it about the new American empire in the Philippines? What is sort of driving American foreign policy? And then Charles, I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about, again, why the United States was hosting this conference, and what does citizen diplomacy do? Because there's like different nodes in this amazing graph that you created for us. There's different nodes when Teddy Roosevelt, or when Roosevelt matters. There's moments when the citizen diplomacy matters. So I just was wondering if you could say more about the implications of citizen diplomacy in one of these kind of great power stories. Thank you.
Go in the order you asked the question.
Oh yes, why not? Yeah, we can also go through.
Okay. Amy was asking, I think, about why TR was more favorable to Japan. And I mean, a couple things. In TR's global concepts, he viewed Britain as the essential ally of the United States. He had come to see France as a benign, friendly, useful power as well. he saw Russia and Germany both with great suspicion and viewed them as potential enemies of the United States, which was one of the reasons he wanted to build up American naval power and to forge a strong partnership with Great Britain. Japan, he had a more ambivalent view of. He admired the Japanese, the way they had modernized. By the way, his view of Japan really undermines the charges that he was a racist. That's something I've had to deal with a lot in my career. He was actually a very progressive racial thinker for his time. And he looked at the Japanese as potentially a constructive great power. He also wanted to be friendly with Japan because he was concerned about U.S. interests in the Philippines. But it went well beyond that. He favored the Anglo-Japanese alliance. He did a lot to try to fortify it. But at the same time, he wasn't sure about Japan. And so he felt the U.S. had to build up its naval power in the Pacific just in case. And I would just go beyond 1905 very briefly here. In his final several years as president, TR really did forge a friendly understanding between the U.S. and Japan that dealt with all the major issues between them, including the very sensitive issue of the immigration of Japanese laborers to the United States. He essentially downplayed the open door policy and believed that Japan should have a predominant position in Manchuria, even though he couldn't say it exactly that way, but it's certainly what he believed and what his policy indicated. He left U.S.-Japan relations in really good shape for his successors, and they didn't do a very good job with his legacy. But anyway, yeah, he saw much more promise in a future constructive relationship with Japan than with either Russia or Germany, at least for the foreseeable future while he was president.
Yes, something very much curious that the United States is pro-Japanese. Very much curious because it's something. For example, I'm researching also the undersea cable affairs, and it's Japan wanted to build an undersea cable between Japan and the United States in the time of the Russo-Japanese War, because it's Japanese cable was, Japan believed that it intercepted by Russians in Shanghai. So Japan didn't want to send a telegram via Shanghai to any other countries, but it's the United States again at that time also says that it's no, now is the time of the Russo-Japanese War. It's impossible for United States to build the direct cable between United States and Japan. It helps something for Japan, means that the United States is not anymore the strict neutrality, but the United States was exactly strict neutrality at all. Always it's something exported arms to each others, and but sometimes say like that. So what is really United States thought? But United States wanted to be more practical, strict neutrality for the same stance for Russia and same stance for Japan, but show to Japanese that I'm a pro-Japanese, and to show to the Russian I'm a pro-Russians, and it's something. It's very good diplomacy to say at that time, or how do you think about yes, that's
One citizen diplomacy, look at the term multi-track diplomacy is part of every State Department in the world's format of diplomacy, which is having informal relationships that support formal negotiations. Classic example was the welcoming parade. We created a tremendous citizen diplomacy by showing up, being enthusiastic, welcoming the delegates, making them feel equal, making them feel heard, making them feel confident they would be able to get it over with, and create an atmosphere in the Portsmouth Peace Treaty that's similar to an atmosphere in the Olympics. Every citizen was into it. Everybody wanted the peace negotiations to be successful. And when the delegates walked down the street, met with people, were taken to their homes, were taken to their businesses, were taken to church services, etc., this positive ion was going on all the time. And nowadays, citizen diplomacy is just having a kid come up from a foreign country, come to your house, and creating a bond with them. Multi-track diplomacy often is talked about in terms of business to business, teacher to teacher, from different countries, especially countries that don't like each other very much. So these informal personal relationships support formal diplomacy. I like to comment on one thing if I can. It's my understanding that the Russo-Japanese War now is considered the beginning of decolonization, of European decolonization in the world. A number of historians have said that. This is the first example of essentially non-white people using modern arms to defeat Western power. This is the beginning of the end of racial superiority of whites in a major way.
I think we can open it up for questions now, so if you'd like to, the microphone will be circulating. And if you could just state your name and perhaps a little bit about yourself. Thank you.
Hello there, I'm Kinchi DeBolt. I've been to Japan numerous times in work and in the Navy. My question is about they had a teletype communication system set up at that building, or they had to go to the naval base, and once the negotiation item was, both parties would sign off on it, or did the United States have, did they have a negotiation sheet from both parties and saying this is what they'll agree to, and then once it was agreed to, both parties signed off on it and they didn't go back to that item? And then was the teletype machines, once they would agree to something, would they instantly send off a teletype to their country, or was there already talking points that they knew that they would agree on?
There were 12 demands by the Japanese that they agreed to negotiate. 12 demands. They're listed on the bottom of the sheet. The sheet's in the material.
Yeah.
It's going to come out. That's hard to explain, okay? The actual negotiations, at the end of the day, they would have a protocol that they would both sign off on. That was not a treaty. That was just where the negotiations had gone. That's the way they wanted to do it. There was no mediator in the middle telling them how to do it. This is actually a very good mediation because you got the two parties to agree to a process themselves. Now they telegraphed, there were a number of telegraph lines at some of the hotels, at newspaper offices, etc. But there was no agreement at all until there was an agreement at all until there was an actual treaty written. I didn't have time to get into that, but it took 7 days to write the treaty. There were riots starting in Japan against the treaty. So the fact that the treaty negotiations were in a positive spot at that moment, rather than in Japan or Russia, was a really good thing because they got the treaty. They got the treaty written, actually written. Kimura would not do the negotiations and say go back and do a writing and come back. He wanted the treaty signed. Had to be ratified by each party, They had to take the treaty back to Russia and Japan to ratify it. But it was considered done. And an armistice ending the war was also considered done and signed there.
My second question is, the people that inhabited those, the islands, the disputed islands, were they Russians or were they Japanese? And did they have to move out once this treaty was signed?
Sakhalin affairs? Sakhalin?
Yes.
Yes, it's Sakhalin. It's 1875. It's an agreement, and as happened, then all the Sakhalin was part of Russian Empire, but though in Sakhalin, who was living in Sakhalin is some kind of names Ainu. Ainu is it's not exactly Japanese, but the Asian language speaking. But there, it's after the Russian occupation of Sakhalin, many Russians came to Sakhalin and living. So at the time of the Russo-Japanese War, many Russians lived, and many of them are arrested by Japanese. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Michael Dennis, Strategy and Policy, Naval War College. It's not my phone. A question for the last speaker. With the fascinating chart, I'm afraid my vision's not really, I don't know if my vision was ever good enough to read that. You're making a really interesting claim here. You're arguing that these informal activities, and I'd love to know the sources for it. I mean, I'm not doubting you, but I'm really curious as to how you know about lawn parties, boat trips, an array of things. But that these were actually the fundamental ways in which we get to the loss of the indemnity, which was a big issue. Remember, as you all know, caused riots in Japan when they didn't get it. Because, to go back to your final comment, sir, yes, this was a big deal, right? The non-Westerners had beaten the Occidentals at their own game. But not getting the indemnity meant that they would still be treated as non-equals. That was a big deal for the Japanese. But I'm really curious about that, forgive me, that middle zone. Because this is really interesting. Your argument is essentially that it is the citizens of Portsmouth, more than TR, are responsible for this. Because that's
Supporting
really
TR.
Supporting him, okay, but this is, without him, they don't get it though.
They don't get it. No, it's not the same thing. It's the support of the formal negotiations. And if you get into mediation and you're in a spot where it's comfortable and positive ions around it, you're going to stay at the table longer. You're going to be more inclined to stay at the table, really, than if you have an uncomfortable atmosphere. But clearly, I'm not making the claim that the local people created what Roosevelt created in the negotiations. Actually, to be honest with you, Roosevelt created the opportunity for the two parties alone to take the matter into their own hands and negotiate the peace. They made the decision. Roosevelt didn't force it on them. He created a process. He created a place. He created people surrounding it. They gave the parties long enough time to continue what their true interests were, and that helped the negotiation process. And the treaty was all the examples come from magazine articles, local histories, and books, et cetera, on the treaty. And they're not all of them, but they were extremely obviously different during the deadlock period when it was critical that everybody stay at the table long enough for everyone to be able to consider their interests.
I am Lieutenant Commander Sanari from Japan Maritime Missile Unit Force. I'm serving in the United States Naval College. Thank you for great lectures. I have a question of condition of the peace agreement. Generally, we Japanese learn in school education or military education that Japan's condition we achieved in the negotiation is appropriate, and it was lucky for us to have succeed to terminate the war because Japan didn't have enough power to continue the war after the Battle of Mukden, taking the industrial power into the consideration. But in the naval college, one of my friends, who is military personnel, said Japan excessively compromised Russia comparing to the Japan's achievement in the battles, and Japan could expel more compromise from Russian delegation. And they said Russia did win the negotiation regardless of defeated in the battles. So my question is, what do you think of that? So I mean, was the condition of the peace agreement appropriate to Japan's achievement in the battles, or could Japan expect more compromise from Russian delegation? Thank you.
Yes, it's I by myself, it's a great achievement or success and not compromise. It's Japan got maybe too much. Its territories, not only Korea but also southern Manchuria. Japan occupied the Korea and southern Manchuria, and occupied area is almost become the Japanese concession. It is much bigger than any reparation money. I believe so. It's a great success of Japan, and that kind of success, it's Portsmouth Peace Treaty agreed.
Yeah, I don't think it's conceivable that Japan could have received a better deal in the negotiations. They would have had to renew the fighting, which was not in their interest. TR pushed the Russians as far as he could, working through Ambassador Meyer and through his meetings and communications out of Oyster Bay. When he got the Russians to accept the cession of southern Sakhalin, that was as far as they were going to go. And I mean, of course, he couldn't know this, but the Russian government was in really precarious condition. There was a revolution that was building. I mean, the situation was, this is a little bit of a detour, but the situation was so bad for the Tsar that he had to call in Sergei Witte to be his chief diplomat because he knew this was the best guy he could send there. Even though Witte had fallen into disfavor, had been kicked out as finance minister in 1903, and but now he was needed. In fact, he would then become prime minister for a short time. But the Russian government was not really capable of continuing the negotiation, I don't think, much longer. It was very fortunate that the treaty was achieved when it was, I think.
This will be our last question.
Oh, sorry, but thank you. Fred Dickinson, University of Pennsylvania. I thought it was a fascinating panel about both TR and Portsmouth, actually, so I had a question related to both. And I love Professor Inowa's sort of a challenge to us to think about TR as an interesting character, not necessarily fully for the Japan side. And to your question, again, I don't know. I'm just a World War I guy. So, but let me just throw out a possibility to your question and see what you think about it. It seems to me that for both TR and both Portsmouth, I mean, the same stakes apply, and the stakes are very high. The stakes are very high because of what we said in the first panel. This is a very mixed outcome. This is not a slam dunk for anyone. And so the likelihood of coming to an agreement is fairly, well, difficult, let's put it that way. So TR, in putting himself out there and committing to this, I mean, kudos, number one. I mean, pretty impressive. Why would he do it? And why would he do it in such a way that is not quite neutral? And again, here's just a possibility. Could he be doing it the way he's doing it? Because the stakes for him too are the same as the stakes for Portsmouth. The point is, America is doing it, and TR is doing it to put the United States on the map, on the global stage. And it's a recognition that the way you do that in the early 20th century is to do something big in Asia, because Sino-Japanese War has happened. It's no longer a scramble for territories in Africa anymore. Brooks Adams, basically at the end of the Sino-Japanese War, is saying all the energetic nations of the world are grasping at Asia. Teddy Roosevelt knows that. The Spanish-American War just happened. America is a Pacific power. America wants to continue to dominate the Pacific. And so it seems to me it's a very easy calculation. He wants in, and he wants the United States to be successful and whatever it takes. And the main point is not necessarily to help the Japanese or the Russians, but to put America on the map. That's my speculation for TR. And for Portsmouth, what I find is quite fascinating, this discussion of citizen diplomacy, is that, so basically, again, I'm in Philadelphia, and it seems to me the equivalent in Philadelphia of the Portsmouth Treaty is the 1876 Philadelphia Expo. The 1876 Philadelphia Expo is very interesting in terms of U.S.-Japan relations, too, because the Japanese have a very important display, and it sort of puts itself on the map. But for the Philadelphians, it's just absolutely essential. Philadelphia is already an industrial city. It's a political center. But with the 1876 Expo, it really becomes a global city. It goes on the global map. And my question about Portsmouth is it proper to understand that this is really what the Portsmouth citizen diplomacy is about? I mean, obviously, they've committed to success. It's got to be a success, but they know that the moment it succeeds, Portsmouth is ready to roll on the global stage. And it seems to me, given what we were talking about in terms of how it's celebrated to this day, I mean, am I right in understanding that this is the event that made Portsmouth and continues to make more Portsmouth? Sorry, that was a long question.
I'll start. I don't think that TR's desire to put America in the center of world events was the primary motivation. He certainly understood it as a real benefit, but he was not grandstanding here. And as you point out in your question, there was no guarantee of success. There was risk of failure, which could hurt his reputation. But he believed the stakes were really high. He wanted to restore an Asian balance of power. He wanted the Anglo-Japanese alliance to remain in place and grow stronger. And he wanted to build the U.S.-British relationship. And ending the war was an important part of that. And he was worried about the Anglo-French Entente Cordiale in Germany. I mean, everything kind of came together to drive him to do this if he thought it was a real possibility of success. And he made that calculation, and then he had the skills and the good fortune to carry it out.
We're actually over time.
Okay.
I'm so sorry to do this.
I think maybe Charles, maybe just
Can we
one
take a couple
response,
minutes?
unfortunately. I
Really
think
quickly,
that,
there's a lot of things, there's a lot of reasons to come to Portsmouth.
That's
But I started the lecture by saying, why did they go after it? Tourism. It's the biggest, industry in New Hampshire still is. And so that was their motivation. But what's interesting about it is that the local people spontaneously, as they would in the Olympics, be great hosts to Olympians, or great hosts to international people, and that's rare. Rare that that was done on such a scale, and it's clear that I didn't tell you the results in terms of what the delegates said about the people, what Roosevelt did because of it, but people recognized it for what it was, that it helped the negotiations. Help didn't determine.
Thank you so much for a wonderful panel.